Hello, everyone, and welcome to the live session today on all things iron. We will cover a lot around iron for the athlete, but also for the general population because it is such a common thing that we need to deal with, but also something that can be really easily overlooked or forgotten when we're focusing on all the other things that might be creating the symptoms of iron deficiency or having suboptimal iron. So hopefully you know the rough, background of iron. We are all practitioners but let's review. We need to all be on the same page for the later discussion. So iron is an essential trace mineral, meaning that we don't create it ourselves in our body, so it needs to come from food or intake. Now, the way that we can have iron is in two different forms. We've got heme iron and non-heme iron. Heme iron is the animal form of iron and is much better absorbed. Absorption is still quite low, like it's still 5 to 35% of the iron within that food, so it can vary a lot, but remember that 5 to 35. The non-heme iron is from plant-based sources and the absorption is lower. So it's from 2 to 20%. So when we see the amount of iron in something, it then changes quite rapidly. So when we're looking at the iron and also where people are getting it from, depending on that source, that will impact their absorption and also how that impacts the way that they can actually utilize that iron source for their iron stores. So it's a critical part of many parts of our features, but the reason why we focus on it so much in the athlete and also just the overall everyday well-being of an individual is it has a really key role in transporting oxygen to active tissue and our muscles, which for energy creation, and also performance, very key thing that you need to be happening is to have that oxygen being delivered. So about 70% of our iron is within our hemoglobin, about 10% is in our myoglobin, and another, let me add it up, 20% is in ferritin, as in our storage iron. So it kind of gets spread out throughout the body. A really small amount is also in enzymes to help create things like ATP, and again, very important for energy creation. So when we're looking at like how we explain that to individuals, you can utilize a few different things. I often go with the bank account analogy where you've got ferritin as your savings and then your hemoglobin as your active spending. I don't usually go into too much depth, but I do place a whole lot more conversation and ensure that they understand the importance of the why behind having adequate stores. And it's just not something that I'm getting distracted by. It's something that's going to impact their life really positively to pay attention to and improve. In terms of where this sits, of where our part is to play, obviously there's a dietary intake part of iron that we need to consider. And this is for everyone, making sure that people, particularly our kids, adolescents, and females, have enough iron going in each day to replace the losses and keep those storage levels high, but also the spending high as well. It is that critical piece for oxygen transport, but also energy metabolism, cognition, immune function, and also training adaptations as well. One key part I want to add there is that if you have athletes in the athlete sense to, go down the sports path, traveling to altitude, it becomes even more critical because often at altitude, the reason they're going is for those adaptations and improvements in performance, and they don't happen unless adequate iron is available. And it's been shown that even if ferritin is adequate by normal standards, if it's below storage of 100, you're still needing to have oral iron supplementation at altitude. So the big piece here is going, well, first of all, I need to make sure I rule out hemochromatosis or something else before I start giving iron. But once that is decided that someone's going to altitude, there's a really clear path of iron availability that you need to make sure of as well, just to go on a little side tangent. So why are we talking about this? Why do we cover it so often? Well, the prevalence is actually really high. So in the female, it's about 15 to 35% have suboptimal iron stores and about 5 to 11% in the male. So it's compromised. It's going to be impacting how someone feels. Even at stage 1 iron deficiency, they will be impacted in terms of daily performance and how they feel. Generally, we'll see someone become symptomatic at different levels of iron deficiency. So symptoms are absolutely important and critical to pay attention to, but also consider where that screening fits into the way that you're working with a client or working with an athlete. So the way that you want to be working it is having a regular screening tool that you'll like within a squad or an individual athlete, you're deciding how often you're screening. The AIS have a really great best practice protocol to guide you on what the best screening frequency is, but also what the best what's the best word? What the best path of action is depending on what the result is as well. So highly recommend that resource. It's excellent. It also has all the different absorption rates of a fair few different foods, which is really helpful to show athletes and also for yourself. But basically, if someone is high risk, have a recent history of iron deficiency, menstrual dysfunction, high blood losses, endurance athlete, symptomatic, then you're going for quarterly check-ins with a full iron studies, which looks at things like your serum iron, your hemoglobin mass, hemoglobin concentration, transferrin, to give you the big picture of where iron is currently sitting, and also appreciating that you need to really counter, where you might even consider also requesting that CRP is included in that to see if there's been a training stress response impacting ferritin markers in that reading as well. So lots of things to consider there, but it's a really important part. So quarterly for high risk athletes or individuals. Biannually is fine for basically females, particularly female athletes, and also someone with a history of iron deficiency, even if it's not current. So, if they've got a history over 2 years ago of iron deficiency or suboptimal iron, biannual makes sense. And then annually for low risk athletes, low risk individuals. So things like your males, strength-based athletes, those types of things are absolutely fine depending on where they sit. So first and foremost, you need to get the initial screen done if they haven't had a blood test in a while. But then following that up, depending on what the results are and depending on what you're working on with alongside their physician on the way that you're going to manage that client as well. So stage 1 of iron deficiency sits at around ferritin that's not around, it does. Stage 1 sits at below 35 ferritin. It goes to stage 2 once ferritin is less than 20. And then stage 3, which is severe deficiency, is less than 12. So this is important because it also frames and changes how you then plan out your way of working with that client and the treatment plan, basically. So if you've got someone on, say stage 1, actually before stage 1s where it's suboptimal and less than 50, that 35 to 50 ferritin is like really borderline. And also depending, I also feel like if they're symptomatic or not. Basically you can trial food-based interventions first. So this will be a review for so many of you, but let's make sure we're all on the same page. Making sure that non-heme iron sources in the diet are paired with vitamin C, doing a bit of a review on what their intake is of coffee, tea, overall polyphenols around higher iron meals. Including heme iron with non-heme iron actually improves the absorption of the non-heme iron as well. So that can also be really handy. The other piece to think about is hepcidin. So if hepcidin is a new term for you or you haven't delved in, it's a really important part of impacting, like what actually impacts iron absorption. So for example, hepcidin is altered across the day. And it increases over the day, which actually reduces iron absorption across the day as the day goes on. So high iron intake is best in the morning, but for most individuals, their iron intake actually falls later in the day. So just keep that in mind. If you are struggling to increase iron in a client, it's really important to then also look at timing, but also appreciating it can just be really hard to change that behavior. And so there's limitations within how much we can impact. It's because of the hepcidin response, not only across the day, but also around exercise. Hepcidin is a hormone that increases and spikes 3 to 6 hours after training. So if you can have iron-based foods as close to that training window as possible to optimize absorption of that iron, that is best. And that'll also be the case for the iron supplements in a sec when we talk those through. Also, just one to consider is ensuring that there's not a high calcium or high zinc intake around those iron foods if possible. And that'll also come up again when we're looking at the iron supplements as well. So just keep in mind, when are we pairing things with dairy? What kind of supplements is this person taking alongside iron? All those types of things. But for the food-based stuff, obviously absorption of heme is ideal. If you've got a vegan or vegetarian athlete, then you need to increase those iron intake levels to counteract the low absorption, but also hack better absorption through some pairings and ensuring that they're not timing it with nutrients that inhibit iron absorption. Um, if ferritin is below 35, so that's stage 1 of iron deficiency, that's where iron oral supplementation is worthwhile trialing. And the way that you do that will depend on the client. There's lots of different options here in terms of how, but I highly recommend the type, yeah, and the form is ferrous sulfate, like the Ferrograd C little red lidded supplements if you're in Australia. The reason for that is that the absorption appears to be best, and the impact from that intervention is best through Ferrograd C. They can Usually we would recommend that that's been taken for about 8 to 12 weeks before reassessing in bloods to see if it's working or improving measures. And if it's not, then reassessing what are we doing wrong? What do we need to add? What else do we need to consider that might be creating this iron deficiency or making it worse or impacting absorption? Timing, as I said, can be important. I am always so cognizant when I'm talking about timing and pairing that we are talking about a behavior. And yes, the science may show all these things in terms of timing and regularity and type, but if someone struggles to remember, if someone has gut upset, if someone doesn't enjoy it, all those types of things, it's going to impact the worthwhile nature of the intervention. And the best iron supplement is the one someone remembers to take and manages to take without upset tummies and all the different negative effects. So there's a few options there. As with food and high iron food, morning is the best time to take iron. And it's best taken again if there's training of a morning as close to that training session, either before, ideally, or after it, if it's needed, to minimize the impacts of hepcidin impacting the absorption of that supplement. The supplement should be paired with vitamin C. That could be, like, say, your Ferrograd C is already in it, or you can pair it with like a juice or a higher vitamin C food, liquid, whatever it might be. The other thing, very much repetition from before, watching the calcium intake around that iron supplementation as well is really important. Also, things like your teas and coffees. So, very similar to what we're talking about with food. Just a note on the type of iron supplementation. Some really cool research being done by some incredible humans in Australia, and soon to be published, is the different types of iron forms and their different impacts to iron levels in the body. So, for example, Multifer is a type of iron supplementation that is often recommended because it sits on the gut better and has a lower risk of upsetting gut and all those types of things. However, it's a different form of iron. So it's a ferric iron that needs to be changed into ferrous iron. And the theory is by the time it gets changed to that absorbable type of iron and usable type of iron, it's too late in the gut and it doesn't get absorbed. So it's actually been shown to not be effective or as effective as Ferrograd C as a type of supplement. So just keep that in mind, that yes, you might be minimizing gut symptoms, but it may have a minimal impact on iron levels as well. So just one for the future. And if someone is having trouble with Ferrograd C in terms of gut symptoms, second daily has been shown to be just as effective as daily, and that's because of the hepcidin response as well. So the only thing, again, because taking supplements is a behavior, I find the biggest challenge with recommending second daily dosing of iron is getting someone to remember to do something every other day is very tricky because it's very hard to hack and stack it onto another behavior. It's not like I have a cup of tea and, every second cup of tea was a terrible example. Terrible. Oh gosh, let me try again. It's not like I clean my teeth every second day. And so if I say we are going to start taking iron every day, what's something you do every morning that you could do at the same time as taking that iron supplement? Sometimes and often athletes find it really handy to put the iron right next to the toothbrush, for example. For every second day, I don't know if everyone else's head's like this or if everyone's life is as chaotic as mine. I won't remember if it was yesterday, the day before, today that I've taken that supplement. So, second daily for some is fine, but for others, they find really hard to keep that as a steady habit. And as I said, the most important part in all this is that they're actually taking the iron. So, second daily is fine. It reduces the risk of gut upset as well, but daily is also totally fine as well. Now, iron infusions. This is one where, as a dietitian, we can hold a place in advocacy. We can hold a space of what is our treatment plan? At what point in time are we going to move towards an iron infusion as the port of call and best option? But it's always in collaboration with a physician. We don't get to decide when someone has an infusion. So just keeping in mind, iron infusion is for usually held for severe iron deficiency, like the stage 3. It can be a tool that's used when oral iron has not been effective, but it can also be utilized in key times of, say, iron deficiency has been picked up very close to competition start or close to someone traveling to altitude, and we don't have time to increase iron levels with oral iron or food, and we need to jumpstart that. And you can think of iron infusion like filling the bathtub right with water, and then the oral iron can be that drip of the tap. So the iron infusion is more like that really hard flow of water to fill up the bath, and the iron oral supplements can be more of a drip that can maintain those levels. So just keep in mind, just because someone has had an infusion doesn't mean they don't need oral supplementation to maintain that level, but working with the physician is a really important part of that to come up with the full treatment plan to get someone not only to optimal levels, but holding them there as well. Um, Also, I guess the other things to consider there in the whole piece of iron deficiency is sometimes the only symptom of celiac disease is low iron or iron deficiency and chronically low iron. And that's because where the villi are flattened in the case of celiac disease is the key section that iron is absorbed to. So if you've got that flattening of villi, oh God, I'm using my hands, so sorry if you're not watching and you're listening. If you've got a flattening of villi, you've got less surface area for the absorption of key nutrients such as iron, and less iron can therefore be absorbed, and you get a low iron reading, and it's very hard to get those iron levels back up or keep them there. Also considering a women's health physician if you've got really heavy periods, really irregular menses, and concerns around bleeds and those types of things as well. Also being aware that the symptoms of iron deficiency don't always mean there's iron deficiency. Also making sure that we're screening for things like B12 and folate, and also remembering that the symptoms of hemochromatosis can also be very similar to low iron. So don't just automatically go try iron and supplement with iron. I hope I'm not like giving you any news you don't know already. But yeah, just making sure that you're screening first before doing any actual jump ins to treatment. And I think that is most things about iron. I want to do like a really quick thing. I think the big pieces aren't going to shock you. I think the really key part of this is listening to the person, listening to what has worked for them previously, but also is what they're going through now, and coming up with a plan alongside them on what this looks like path forward, whether it is a combination, whether it is one thing at the time, is not only your decision, it's also the person you're working with, and ensuring that they understand the full picture is a really crucial part to them then valuing and also owning that behavior as well. Because if you're asking them to change their intake, change, how when they have their coffee, it's actually pretty personal. So you've also got to choose your battles. And sometimes it'll be like, they're not going to necessarily change their milky coffee at that point, but we can, move the iron to this or increase iron here and those types of things. So working alongside them means that you're coming up with a plan of what's right for them, what they feel ready for and able to do and confident they can do, rather than telling them all these rules about this, then not that, then, all these different things. It becomes actually really limiting. And I think that's where we can take this science and appreciate when it might be best in the science land, but then placing it in what's best for the client is just as important, and translating that and just appreciating that it's not always going to be perfect, but it can be improved or there can be progress. So I hope that has helped. I love this area quite a lot. I think there's lots of improvements that we can make as a clinician in this space, and also impact how people feel as a result as well. If there's any questions, let me know. But otherwise, that's us. Hey,
Hi,
April.
thanks so much for your session. That was so good, and really timely for me, actually.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Personal little learning.
yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. You presented that so nicely. Um, can I ask you a couple of questions? Are there other
Okay.
people on? Is that
No,
okay?
you've got a personal session. So
I've got a personal
on
session.
the podcast, they'll be sorted. But nah, this is great.
Um, I am wondering if you have used the Orthoplex iron in the past and what your results have been like. I have been tossing between the
Mm.
C and the Orthoplex iron glycinate, and in my mind, I was just like, well, we know that magnesium glycinate's absorbed better than other formats of magnesium. So what about the iron? I haven't personally looked into a literature yet, so I probably should have done that before asking you.
No, do you know what? I haven't either. The Let me look into it though, because I love that question. And I feel like this is the first time in the last few years we've actually been questioning the different types.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I know in myself, often I just go for the type that's easiest to access and most low risk for that individual I'm working for. And
Yeah,
I've probably assumed too heavily that, like, well, if it's on the market, it must work. So
yeah,
that's on me.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I need to double check as well if the Orthoplex might even be batch tested too.
Yes,
Uh,
some orthoplex is.
yeah.
The other thing which is different with iron is it is an OST-R supplement, which means
Yeah.
it's registered. So if you're working with athletes that need batch testing, iron as a rule is actually OST-R and not OST-L.
Uh,
And
yeah.
OST-R means that it's highly registered and controlled and doesn't need batch testing.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for
Just to
reminding that.
complicate it more. And then we
No,
expect athletes to understand all this, and it's like, "Oh, no, we don't." So, yeah, you should be okay with the iron. Let's have a look.
sometimes forget.
It's an iron glycinate. Let me
That's
did it Yeah, I need to look into this.
yeah, same. It's one of the only one that's an iron glycinate. There's
Yeah.
another form that is a liquid that's just on the market now,
Mm,
but I probably wouldn't use it in because it's got some other herbs and stuff in it too, but that's an
yeah.
iron bisglycinate, I think.
Yeah, this is really
But the Orthoplex glycinate I'm using in a young athlete at the moment, and I'm like, oh, I hope that we've done the right thing because I'm waiting for him to
Mhm.
have his levels retested.
Yeah.
But I probably should have just done the most accessible, which was Ferrograd C. But anyway,
No,
learning adventure.
no, I feel like we're just on a learning adventure. The only
Yeah.
other thing to add to that is some of the new products on the market, like the iron glycinates, is that they're less than 80 milligrams per serve.
Agree.
This one's 88. I just had a look. So it should be okay, but you don't want to go lower than 80 and definitely no lower than 60. So the ideal dosage is around that 100 mark.
Yeah.
But just noting that some of the new iron on the market is not only not as well absorbed, it's also not enough in terms of dosage. So just another thing to kind of add, I guess, to that background too.
Yeah.
When we're looking
Perfect.
for it.
That's really good. I've actually not used iron supplements alongside an infusion before either. So you've certainly sort of taught me to think about that. I've kind of used infusions before as being like, oh, it's a quick fix and we won't have to worry about it for a while.
Mm,
But I have had a presentation of that only this week where it certainly hasn't been the case. And I was hoping
mm.
to even run through just a quick little case study with you and
Mm.
wonder what you would have done in the same situation.
Oh, let's see. I don't know if I've got a list, but
A
let's do it.
No, that's cool. 10K runner, phone call on
Mm.
Tuesday night. So 2 days ago, Tuesday evening at about 7 p.m, had just received back blood test results, just checking on iron studies and things like that.
Mm.
Ferritin level of 30, so male athlete, ferritin of 30, had an iron infusion in August last year, so 2024, and not really worried about his iron levels. He's not a regular patient of mine, by the way. He just kind of comes to the clinic. Had not had any iron tests since August last year when he got the infusion.
Mm.
Is doing is going away on Monday, so a couple of days' time for altitude training in America
Mhm.
for a few weeks. Really wanted to maximize the adaptations
Yeah.
there. Asking me on Tuesday evening, should I get a really quick iron infusion? But to complicate things further, has a championship, national champs on Saturday, and was worried about last time he had an iron infusion. I was really headachy and a little bit sore, but I really want to maximize my altitude training. And I was like, oh my God.
Makes sense.
We tossed and turned over the phone for ages about like, should we just get going on oral supplements? Should he get the iron infusion like by end of week before he flies out on Monday? Just wondering what you would have
Mm.
maybe thought in that same instance.
Yeah. First one is infusion really close to an event is risky. So generally wouldn't be the ideal. Obviously, the ideal would be to find out that they're not great in iron well before, a week out. So, this is already like a really real life scenario. The oral iron supplementation 100% would just get started straight away at those levels. Even if they're close, anything under 100 for ferritin, you would still want to be having oral iron supplementation at altitude anyway. And the research is more around even if you're low in ferritin, as long as you've got iron available through oral supplementation, the adaptations are still going to be there. The
Okay.
ideal would be to optimize iron levels with an infusion before altitude if you don't have time, to do things. But I think complicating that with the event, the oral iron supplementation would be a no-brainer, particularly because of the risks around iron infusion,
Yeah.
I would feel. So, they can 30 is still there's some bank account savings still there.
Yeah.
It's a shame they haven't kept their bath level up, but, yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize the adaptation side of altitude, iron is crucial. That
Yeah.
it actually doesn't happen unless iron's available to build that hemoglobin mass and
Yeah.
transport that oxygen. So I think, yeah, that's just the real no-brainer at the very minimum. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
probably the other thing to add to that, April, and I probably didn't talk about it enough in the session, is just ensuring energy availability, and also
Yeah.
carbohydrate availability. So, not just focusing on that one micronutrient, but also the whole picture of what might be creating that deficiency in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially, with altitude, you've got a higher energy demand and hydration demand anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to look into that actually. I've worked very little with athletes who have done altitude training. So,
Mm.
and figuring out how do we work out hydration and
Mm.
energy demands while they're there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably one of my favorite things. I think it's just such a cool part of the sports nutrition side. But in football, we're often, going to weird and wonderful areas that are at altitude to play. So it's something
Mm.
that's kind of in our bucket of,
Yep.
skills now, but that's because we're using it. So
Yeah.
zero judgment at all because altitude is quite unique, to have to deal with in Australia. So, yeah. Well, thanks, April. Thanks for the
Well, I look
chat,
forward
and I
to
think with the addition of that
Sydney
case.
University.
Oh, what was that? Sorry, April?
Yeah, cool. Oh, I
Amazing.
was about to say I look forward to the, altitude training
Oh, look,
session that you'll run
yeah,
next.
good shout. It's a good shout. I'd happily do that, actually. I'll just let Monica know that we should book that one in. It's very niche, but I'm here for it.
Sounds great.
Yeah, for all those people who
Yeah,
get to
awesome.
go to nice places.
Yeah, well, not even the people traveling, like, he just comes through the clinic that I work at,
For
so,
sure.
not even
Amazing.
traveling, but it would benefit.
Yeah, cool.
Perfect.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Alicia.
much. Have a good arvo and enjoy your
No
Christmas if
worries.
I don't see you before. Bye.
Thank you.